Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this, the fifth show in a series of current affairs shows that we're running. This will end just before Christmas now because we've had a couple of weeks break for various reasons, which we won't go into. But this evening I've got a number of guests on. So we've got Sarah James from TZM Movement. Would like to come and say hello to us?
Hello.
Hello. Welcome back. Welcome back to the show. And you've got better signal this week, so that's good news.
Let's hope it stays like this.
Okay, yeah, fingers crossed on that. Neal, welcome back from Portugal. Have a good time?
Hi again. Yeah, absolutely fantastic. Batteries recharged, ready to go.
Fantastic. And a new guest on the show this evening. We've got Phil Smith, all the way from Rugby, and someone I've known for a few years now. Come and say hello, Phil.
Hi, Chris. Thank you for having me on.
No problem whatsoever. I'm just going to give a quick summary of what we've got to cover this evening. There's some really interesting and meaty subjects. So rather than do this with few guests, we delayed it so that we could have more people and more discussion. So what we've got coming up: the need for jobs, the Industrial Revolution. So how did the actual phenomenon of job come about in the first place? There's a video out there called Humans Need Not Apply, which is a really interesting look at how things might go into the future as technology begins to consume many of the jobs that we've got out there, as much as 45% of the job market that exists today. We're going to talk about zero marginal cost as the cost of fuel through renewables and the reduction in labour costs for production, how that's going to force the price of goods down, and what might be the impact of that with less people working, etc., etc. We're going to talk about the impact of more free time and what people might do with that, how they're actually going to have any money if there's less jobs out there and less people earning and producing things. We're going to be talking about the living wage, not the term that's been hijacked by the Conservatives from what the Greens were talking about, but what might be a living wage. What will we all be doing? How will all this free time impact us, and what will we be doing? And actually looking at the current situation where there are still plenty of people out of work, but loads of things that need doing in our community, and lots of things actually not being done. So lot to cover, and we're going to get stuck straight in here. The need for jobs and the Industrial Revolution. So I guess that's kind of when it all started. What do you think, James, Sarah?
Well, I suppose we did have an economy of sorts before that, massively scaled down. But yeah, that's where society certainly started to take a major change in the way that jobs and earning a living and all that sort of thing was actually structured. Focusing on growth, and that was the sort of beginnings of capitalism as we know it today. So yeah, it's certainly a good historical jumping point for the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, kind of that's where that's where, as you say, GDP. I guess I don't know whether it was recognised as such back then, but it's certainly where the harvesting of people's energy began. Was it, Neal?
No, sorry, I missed that question.
You know, I mean, that's when kind of back in the Industrial Revolution where people started to kind of migrate away from farming, I guess, as the farming procedures became more efficient. I guess there was a surplus of labour, and then Industrial Revolution took place, workhouses and factories began to spring up, and we had the birth of the job.
Yeah, absolutely. And historically, when that happened in the past, whenever jobs were created with new technology, they always created more jobs. So when the spinning jennies were invented, they need people to work them, they needed people to maintain them. So they actually created jobs in the past, all these revolutions, which is something we're going to talk about. Well, that's not going to happen next time.
Yeah, what's your take on it, Phil?
Yeah, from my limited knowledge of it, that would seem to be about right. I mean, if you think back before the Industrial Revolution, yeah, people's labour wasn't really used in that. Well, apart from, I suppose, you might think of the Romans exploiting people as slaves on galleys and that kind of thing. But that's sort of the mass market of jobs. Before that, you had a lot of people who were effectively self-employed, the blacksmith, farm hands, I guess. And in some ways, we've kind of gone back to that in recent years, more and more people becoming self-employed. I mean, I think I'm in a similar position because for many years I had a job. I worked in an office for a company, and I suppose I did that for many years because I was conditioned into that way of thinking, that was the thing to do. And it's only in more recent years that I've suddenly had my eyes open that there are actually other ways to be employed. But that's obviously happening with a number of people who are going self-employed, but I guess the majority are still out there working at their jobs, their careers. But how long are those jobs going to last? Depending on which predictions you believe, they may have 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, whatever, but we don't really know. But it looks like over the next generation it will change rapidly.
Yeah, I mean, did you get to watch that Humans Need Not Apply, James? Did you see that video, James, Sarah?
Yeah.
I mean, there's some really interesting points in there. Looking back at the beginning of the 19th century and the sort of comparison with the horse, and the horses saying, well, we don't have to go into war anymore. We don't have to lug those ploughs around in the fields. We don't have to do all this delivering the mail across the country. We've got these cushy numbers now in the cities where things are looking up, and they'll probably always have new, rather easier jobs for us to do. But change that word horse for human and roll the clock forward 100 years or so, things look very different.
Well, what happened at the time was that with the machinery and technology, we're able to produce more and at the same time create other tasks, other jobs, and that's how the economy evolved. The thing is, and at the time there was a group called the Luddites. The Luddites, have you ever heard of them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They said they didn't like the technology, if I'm not wrong, and they wanted to destroy the machinery and the technology so that people carry on with their lives, because a lot of people didn't have the skills to move forward. Called the phase called the Luddite fallacy. Well, they say, well, that's actually not true, because with new technology we can create other things and people can carry on with their lives. A lot of economists nowadays keep using the same excuse, but as the documentary that you mentioned mentions, is that technology and AI is getting so good, they will be able to do better and more than we can. So that's the problem.
Yeah,
but the thing is I think just to chime in, I think there's an issue with culture lag here.
Yeah.
Is that what is it? A lie has got halfway around the world before the truth has got its boots on. So it's got this Luddite fallacy idea that many people still carry around in their head, much like social Darwinism and other sorts of outdated concepts that, in terms of our current understanding of science and technology, are quite clearly obsolete. So the Luddite fallacy would have been born out of the Second Industrial Revolution, especially with the particular story about the Luddites who smashed the machinery that was taking their jobs. And of course that term is coined now, and yes, some economists do question the scale of how technology will take over the marketplace, but a whole hell of a lot more of them are coming on board with it, at
Now.
least not ignoring the
Yeah.
discussion.
And
Yeah.
now they are.
In the mainstream.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know you've got a view on this, Neil.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing is, as human beings, what we're not very good at is looking to the future. We talked about this in the past with 5 years maximum timescale, because that's the way our elections work, and we don't seem to be able to look any further than that. And people forget how quickly things have progressed in the past. People forget that Facebook and that didn't exist in 2000, and now it's all pervasive. There wasn't an iPod, there wasn't iPhones, and these things have happened. And what they haven't caught on to yet is that these increases are becoming exponential, and how quick they're happening. So when people say, "Oh yeah, there's going to be a jobless future," I always like to use the example of the driverless car. Because it's something that people have actually heard about at least, but everyone says, "Oh no, but that's not going to happen for 20 years or so." They don't understand how quick technology is coming now, and driverless cars will be on the roads by 2020. So it's happening quicker and quicker, and as human beings, we don't seem to be able to accept the fact that these changes are happening and plan for them.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that was in that video was that if you replace the word automobile with auto, and actually any object or thing that requires moving from A to B, be it sand in a quarry, or be it stuff around a warehouse, or be it a human being in a vehicle which is appropriately dimensioned for a human being to sit in, or any other type of transportation, these things will be working without humans. And I think it was something like 70 million people, they were saying on that video, who are in this transportation industry, and basically all those jobs gone, basically. Right, yeah, and the driver for it is quite simple. Insurance companies will probably say that even if we're getting 10 quid a year premium and nothing ever happens and goes wrong, then that's more reliable than sticking a human behind the wheel for 300 quid.
Yeah, and the companies, I know James has got a sort of slightly counter argument to that, but even if you take the insurance side out of that, the incentive for the companies to do this is a must, because the most expensive part of any company is the human labour, and if you can get rid of that and take over to robots or bots, then you can work 24 hours a day non-stop. You don't need any breaks, food breaks, holidays, and your costs get driven down massively. The problem is, most of those jobs that go first time round, this seem to be the lower skilled jobs, the driving and that, and therefore how do we then re-educate millions upon millions of people to jobs that we don't even know what they're going to be, if we believe the people that there are going to be new jobs created?
Yeah, well, so Phil, what's your view on this? Because it's a conundrum. There's no question that, like Neil said then, yeah, well, how are we going to retrain these people? Well, if you're going to retrain them, you've either got to retrain them into a job that they were never qualified to do, but we've got enough people doing those jobs already, so that's a bit of a non-starter, or they can do other things which, well, that are, if you like, robots can't do, which are potentially things like dealing with human beings.
Yes, I guess so. I really don't know the answer to this. I mean, of course, and it will be exponential, because I suppose once you get to the point when the machines can then replicate themselves better than we can, what happens then?
Well, you've got programs writing better programs than programmers can program, and they're learning as they go along. So yeah, we're already on the trail, aren't we? Of they can't physically rebuild themselves at the moment, but they're already creating better versions of programs than the ones that were coded by programmers in the first place.
Yeah. So I can't remember what your original question was, Chris.
Well, it was about like, if we're going to retrain people, like, take just one example: 70 million people driving autos around, and suddenly those jobs have gone. What will those people do? Well, because there's not much they can be retrained in that can't be done by a computer, and well, so what else? Yeah, where are these roles going to come from?
I really don't know. I really don't know. Yes, if all the people who are driving taxis, driving lorries, driving vans, doing deliveries, or part of the transport and logistics, just that in itself, people who work in the transport and logistics system, people who work in warehouses, you know, feasibly, well, the technology exists now to do all those jobs, really. Technology exists to drive lorries on the road and all that and everything like that. So theoretically, all those could be wiped out. What would they be replaced by? It's difficult to think, isn't it? I mean, you can have jobs that where people deal with other people, whether that's social workers, hypnotherapists, or whatever. But there's only going to be a finite number of them. What? I mean, and how is everyone? How are people going to afford to hire those kind of people because they won't have money?
It's a problem. It is a problem. What do you think, James? What's your? Neal mentioned that you had an alternative view to this. So, what did he mean by that?
Well, to answer the last question first, it's called contradiction of capitalism. If you look at the definition of capitalism, it requires people to have jobs to be to then secure enough purchasing power to buy the goods that other people are turning out to keep up cyclical consumption and keep the economy growing. Inflation, which encourages more growth, etc., etc. But as it was just rightly raised, if people if the machines are taking over people's jobs, then people don't have the purchasing power to buy the goods that the machines are turning out. But of course, it's in the interest of companies to continually move towards technology because of those pesky workers that keep asking for money and, you know, living wage and all those sorts of things. So, yeah, this is a problem that most people have ducked their heads in the sand about for long, and now it's going to come back and bite them in the backside. Well, coming back to the point that Neal was raising, where I might take issue, was with the insurance companies on cars. I think they like people crashing. I think they, you know, and you've got very, very highly reliable cars, then you don't have insurance companies. It's very much against their interest to have driverless cars. If I was running an insurance company, I would not think it was a good idea at all. And what we constantly try to do is bend over backwards with the current structure and system that we have to say, well, we have to see how we can make all these changes fit. And that gives us the psychology of actually holding back technological development, technology we invented to make our lives on this planet easier, and we're deliberately holding that back to withhold a system that clearly isn't fit for purpose. It doesn't make any sense. The real thing is to go, right, well, Federico Pastono wrote a great book called Robots Will Steal Your Job, but it's okay, how to survive the economic collapse and be happy. Because his way of going about this is, well, if we just step back, we're saying that technology is making our lives easier and more abundant and more efficient so that we can go off and play more. What's bad is the ruts that we've got ourselves stuck in an economy that's causing a mass extinction on Earth anyway. Most of the jobs that people have are causing a massive amount of destruction to this planet. What's the point in having them? We need to change the conversation and say, why is the benchmark of awesomeness in our world for everybody to... And most of that busy work is contributing to a system that's killing our life support system. It's absolutely insane.
So when you say that the job, I mean, just name a few that we can sort of resonate with when you say the jobs that they're doing are almost in the next evolution of the species are kind of irrelevant, really. We shouldn't be doing them. Are you talking about things specifically like in the oil industry and petrochemicals and agriculture and those kinds of industry sectors, or are you talking more specifically about some other type of...
I would say probably 95% of jobs, at least, it depends on how fundamentally flawed you think this system is. So there's a knock-on effect. So for instance, you know, okay, those are the easy ones, oil, la la la. Those are the ones you would expect people, I suppose, of our maybe disposition to pick. But let's pick another one, like counsellors. You know, and you go, whoa, hang on a second, counsellors are things we need more of. That's what the Conservatives are stripping, and yada, yada, yada. Yeah, but where do the psychological disorders come from that mean that we need more counsellors? It comes from the fact that we have a monetary system that's based on people going out and doing the lion's share of those pointless jobs, like even being on a checkout till at Sainsbury's, which is a pointless waste of human life. You know, and then you suddenly back, and once you start to unravel the system that caused the problems in the first place, you suddenly realise that you don't have as many messed up people walking around because they're not being forced to do shit with nearly a third of their life, the other third they spend sleeping, or maybe even more, doing something they can't stand. 80% of people now say they can't stand their job. And just to back, you know, I mean, in what we're doing, that's what needs to be said, and a lot of the economists are sort of saying, well, how can we tinker with the system? Things like driverless cars, how do we bring them in? And my concern is that the public are so misinformed about things like driverless cars that we won't get them because bureaucracy in the way, and they'll stand in the way of technology. For instance, in every single sector of human society, I can name a technology that beats what we're currently doing, hands down, embarrassingly. So if all of that technology exists, and we're withholding that, what would stop us withholding a load of other really decent, you know, technology that comes through? That's not to discount the conversation we're having. Technology clearly is going to be a threat to human employment, even with the stupid sustainability. But I worry that great things like driverless cars that could stop 1.2 million people dying on the roads of this planet every year simply aren't adopted because people's naive assumptions and the idea that we should keep people employed in these jobs that 80% of them don't even like anyway. Ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, we are going to come on to people being able perhaps to pick something that's more appropriate to their liking and that they're passionate about. But yeah, I mean, fundamentally, if there's more people happy on the planet, there'd be less need for hypnotherapists or psychologists and stuff like that. But what do you think, Neal, when we're talking here about, and we know this has gone on, we know that the people inventing technology have got technology that would render existing technology obsolete. We know that. They've been doing it for decades. You know, the iPhone 8 is probably already worked out. It's just it'll knacker the iPhone 6 if they bring it out now. So we know that technology is far more advanced than being told to the being rolled out to the public. But yeah, there is, like the oil industry, there is going to be people that are putting the brakes on. The banks are doing it. The banks are putting the brakes on. We could do all our banking through mobile phones. But no, we've got buildings and we've got people employed in banks, so we've got to keep hanging on to that and dragging our heels until they've worked out how they can make money in the new game. Yeah?
Yeah, I understand that. And in the past, that's definitely been the case. There's lots of technologies been hidden away and bought up by the patents bought up by big companies. I do think we're at a different stage in this time of how easy it is to get a startup going. So if you do have a technology that is going to be disruptive to a sector, I think it is easier to get it to market now than it ever has been in the past with crowdfunding, just with awareness on the internet that people wouldn't have had in the past. I mean, most people wouldn't know that GM long time back brought out a very successful electric car, but because under pressure from the oil industry, they scrapped every one of them. They only gave them to people on a lease system. They called them back in and they scrapped them because they were too successful and the oil industry didn't want it to happen. So there is precedent for that happening. But with some of these tech companies coming out and really wanting to change everything, I think Personally, I think this time it will be different. I think the old guard will fight as hard as they possibly can, and they may drag on the current system far longer than it needs to. But there will come a tipping point when, say, for someone, example like Elon Musk, just gets so much power that he's then bigger and more powerful than the oil industries and that, and then the governments will take its side.
Yeah, I mean, what you're talking about here is people voting with their feet, people power, people creating within themselves, if you like, starting to take responsibility and creating almost this tidal wave of desire to have things which are more appropriate for the environment, more sustainable, and a gradual widening in the awareness of that, so that some of these new technologies are actually brought in despite these big companies. I mean, it's been a cartel, and it's quite interesting, isn't it, that no one in the history of the human race has ever given up power voluntarily. And where we're not talking about control of countries here, we are talking about control of technology and control of development of things that, you know, improve society and take us to a new place. And while those people have control, they have power, and actually giving up that power is something that none of these people are going to be willing to do. It's almost going to have to be taken off them. So Phil, over to you. Comments and thoughts on some of this stuff we've been talking about?
Yeah, it strikes me that this whole post-capitalist world, it's almost as if, you think about it, at the moment we're still being told by most of the media and most people, it appears, still believe that the capitalist system is the only way, and if anyone has any views, any ideas about creating any other kind of more planned economy, they're completely crazy. You know, hence the coverage of Jeremy Corbyn, for example, who's obviously been portrayed as either a, well, he hasn't been portrayed as having mad ideas about the future. He's been portrayed as having mad ideas about the past. So that's apparently, he's supposed to be completely retro. But it does seem that this whole onward march of technology is going to force, as people have been saying, that it's going to force the end of the capitalist model as we know it. And I suppose what we create in the end is going to be a kind of, it's going to be something akin to a socialist economy, because it will have to be planned out more. I don't think you can just leave it to a market to sort all this out. It's going to have to be planned. It's the only, I mean, until now, I've always been of the view that it's very difficult to implement socialism, because you have to get it would only work. Well, capitalism in its extreme obviously doesn't really work. Socialism, when it's been implemented, doesn't really seem to work, because certain people get corrupt and try to have more than their fair share, or want to or abuse their power. You know, you look at somewhere like East Germany, where you had the regime driving around in their Volvo, specially made Volvo limousines, while everyone else had a Trabant. You know, and it seems that wherever you want to impose that kind of system, in the Soviet Union, they had to kill lots of people in order to implement that system. You know, Lenin and Stalin had to kill loads and loads of people. And it's like in this country at the moment, as it stands right now, if you wanted to make Jeremy Corbyn Prime Minister, it appears we'd have to kill about 37% of the population in order to get him elected. But I think technology is going to change that, because it's the political argument is going to become less relevant, because the practical reality is going to make it a necessity. Am I making any sense here? That's what's coming off the top of my head.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is with these kind of questions is they are absolutely all embracing. You can't have one thing taken in isolation and exclude other things. So politics and the kind of regime that we'll be moving into is going to have to change unbelievably. And you know, I think whether it's slow or fast, or how quickly it's taken up, or what we all agree on is that change is inevitable, and that actually the number of jobs that are available are going to go down. But if that's the case, and the cost of production is going to go down, we're going to have a situation where, and maybe, and this is a big point too, maybe we need to convert expectations so that people are not sold that your value is based on the amount of stuff you've got in your life, but actually value is based on how much you contribute to society and what difference you're making, and consequently needs for material wealth. And this might be brought about by such a terrible period of penury that actually people are forced to expect less, vis-a-vis what's going on in Greece and other places. If we were forced into that mode, then more people would start to appreciate and have gratitude for what they've got. But this is a complex period in our evolution, and there's no question that the combination of price of product, availability of jobs and earning potential, and expectation of what you need in your life are going to come together at some point and create a solution. What do you think, Sarah James?
Well, I think it is going to be a transition that we're already assisting, and it will carry on throughout these next 10 years, where slowly companies will go down. The ones who are more competitive because they got technology will have better profits. The ones who are not following the same down, people will lose their jobs, and they will lose their consumption power, and that will leave, possibly, I don't know if it will happen or not, in their values when they actually realize, okay, now we can't do certain things that we used to do. Probably, and if it's a lot of people, they get together and they start working in communities, right? It's one hypothesis. There's other possible plan that people now are talking about, which is the universal basic income, so that people who they can have a job, they don't have to have a job, everybody will have amount of cash where they could have their basic needs met, even though they don't have jobs or not. But a lot of studies, a lot of experiments still need to be done. It's an idea, but we don't know if it's going to work, if it's not going to work.
But it is an idea that's had some success.
Support.
That should and some success.
Experiments.
And the beauty part about that is that it starts to then feed into the new economy that we're talking about. If you take the pressure off, you say, look, you've got a roof over your head, you've got clothes on your back, food in your belly, okay, that's sorted. Now what are you going to do? Most people won't take that crappy job at Tesco's, you know, stacking shelves.
Well, probably they won't be.
Yeah, or if they do, they can do it less. You know, the point is that it frees you up then to go, how am I going to contribute to society? Because people can't think about that at the moment. It isn't even an option.
If they don't have their basic needs met, they're not going to think about working in community. They're going to think, how am I going to eat tomorrow, right? So
the universal basic income, unconditional basic income, is a good way of potentially dealing with the issue of more jobs being automated. And actually, there's a TED talk again by Federico Pastono on this subject that's out at the moment regarding that as a direct proportional response to this coming wave of technological unemployment.
It's called "What If Everybody Had Free Cash?"
What if everybody had free cash? Okay, so let's make a note of that, because in Link for Growth we've got a Pinterest board which has got TED Talks we like, and I'm sure we'll like that one. So I will tap you up for the link for that. I know, Neal, that you've got a real strong view on this, so let's bring you into the conversation. A sort of unrestricted work, don't work level of income. It's got to be the answer, isn't it, long term? And there are lots now of examples of that being deployed and having some measure of success.
Yeah, it's been trialled, and so far from the research I've done, I haven't found a trial that has been unsuccessful. It needs to be done on a wider scale. I would love it if a country was brave enough to say they're going to do the whole thing, but I doubt if one country will be brave enough at the start. But it looks like Finland are going to do it in a region rather than just towns and villages, so that'll be really interesting to see how it works. But we have to come up with some sort of solution, because jobs aren't going to exist. Food production is going to be fully automated. The delivery of the food is going to be fully automated. But energy costs are going to be driven down to practically zero with new technologies. So under our current system, what they seem to be trying to do, as we've been doing, is giving people completely meaningless and pointless jobs right now to get your unemployment benefit in the UK. They're making you do the most demeaning thing. They literally like gang pressing people to stand outside stations and just direct people just to get £70 a week, and it seems quite horrible and quite cruel that we're demonising these people to this level when they've got no real options, and they can't afford to re-educate. So we're at the start of the process. It's already started. There aren't enough jobs now, so we might as well bite the bullet and start looking into it. The Green Party has costed the basic income. They say it works, but yeah, let's test it. I don't see how it can fail personally. And weirdly enough, I think it will be capitalism that leads it to happen, because, as Sarah said earlier, one company will end up dominating, so many people will be out of work, there'll be no people to buy that company's product, and all of a sudden you're in a death spiral of that thing, and it will be the corporations calling for a basic income because there's no one to buy their product. That, again, will only keep capitalism, a different sort of capitalism, alive a bit longer, and we do need to go to a more structured, managed planned society. Long term, money will be irrelevant, but we've got to do it. We've got to find a stepping stone to that, and I don't see any other answer personally apart from basic income.
I mean, it poses some really interesting questions. I mean, you touched on it, James. Let's say I'm getting £15 an hour from sitting at home, and Tesco's say, "Well, do you know what? We need someone to manage our store." The wage would have been £17 an hour. So for going in and working all week, I get £2 an hour more for doing that job. It's like, well, no thanks. Actually, I can't be bothered. And there'd be so much of that going on that these places will just, well, I don't know how they'll get people to work in them. So that has absolutely humongous ramifications. Any thoughts, Phil?
Yeah, I just wonder what we're all going to do when we haven't got jobs and we don't need. Are we going to play? Are we going to hang out on Google all day? We're going to play golf. Are we going to? I don't know.
Well, I think I would say on that the evidence shows that people actually go out and follow a passion. Actually, people go out and educate themselves in something they're interested about. They volunteer for a community-based project. That's what the evidence is saying people do. There will be a small amount of people who do just want to sit on the sofa, but they will be a very small amount of people. I think it could.
I think there's a lot of things.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Sorry, we just had a interruption here, and I didn't hear.
That's okay. No, I was just saying that the evidence shows that in the trials that when people do go on the basic income, they don't just sit around doing something. They do actually get active in the community or retrain into something else that they're passionate about. And I think follow your passion. I think that's what it'll be. And if that is playing golf all week, then fair enough. Why not?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
So, have you got any thoughts, James or Sarah? Anything to add to that? Are you back in the game over there?
I think I think you're right. I mean, I often say, well, I'd rather have someone sitting on their backside watching Jeremy Kyle all day long than going and working for the financial centres in London, New York stock exchanges. Any day of this week. Any day this week. It's really not about the work you do. It's about what the ends are. It's not about, it's what are you actually trying to achieve, and which comes back to what we're saying. But people invariably find things to do, and it's very difficult for someone to just lay down and do nothing, eventually, even if you try watching TV all day long, it is actually difficult. I mean, you can get to a certain amount of hours, and it really, after a while, you just have to go outside because you get cabin fever. So, I'm sure people will work out something constructive to do with their time. But I think it creates a whole different social contract, doesn't it, as well, with the people, rather than people feeling forced to do something under coercion. That lack of coercion will enable them to really feel like they want to give something back to their community, whereas at the moment their community is saying, give to us, give to us, give to us, and gives very little in return. I think the whole contract will sort of change things quite a lot. But it doesn't mean that this subject's being ignored by the powers that be. There's a guy called Johan Rayner, who is the CEO of Richmond. He's a very rich billionaire, and he came out saying that the wealth gap that's being created is going to have to lead to something like a universal unconditional basic income and socialism, if you want to call it that, but those type of policies, because he doesn't see that it's in any way avoidable. And so to have someone like that say things like that, so is intriguing. I think there's I think it's important to note a couple of actual things, just backtracking slightly, actually, if I may, because some people who might be listening to this and might think, oh, you're all living in cloud cuckoo land. There's a couple of things to say about retraining, and that's Moore's law, and some of the work done by Ray Kurzweil basically shows that the rate of technological efficiency has been increasing at an exponential rate. And just a brief sort of idea of what an exponential actually means, because people go, oh, that's just growing fast. If you took exponential steps, 30 in one direction, pop quiz, how far do you think you'd get?
Say the question again.
If you take 30 steps exponentially, so that's 1 plus 1, 2 plus 2 plus 4, and times you're doubling. So
probably get to the moon and back.
Yeah, and then 7 times around the planet. 8 times around the planet, which surprises people. I use that sometimes in talks because I presume you've probably heard of that before, but usually you can catch people off guard, and you say, that's how fast technology is actually increasing its efficiency, mate. It's not like the we're used to. And in fact, in the top 50 jobs created in the last 20 or 30 years, or the ones that have seen the most employment are the same. There's only one new sector in there, out of all of them, and yet a lot of them are coming out of the top list through technology and not being replaced by anything. Like for instance, Instagram. Instagram is worth billions, and it was set up and sold, I believe, for like 6 people. Started it because it's just a tech company online. You need some geeks to piece it together, and that's a lot of money for a very, very small clique of people. Coming back briefly, if I may, just to the exponential curve explanation. A recent Oxford University study stated that 35 to 45% of the jobs could be gone within the next 10 to 20 years. So, yeah, like I think that's just slams home what we're talking about here. That it's really not something that can or should be pushed under the rug. So, yeah.
I mean, what on that video that we've been talking about earlier, they mentioned that Dr. Watson, which is an IBM program that's been created, and the risk of basically doctors who are perceived as being one of those jobs that's pretty unlikely to fall under the scythe, as it were. But the technology means that program has access to all the results, all the patients' records, all the world's patients' records, how the drugs work together, the combinations thereof, and the patient's history. There is no doctor on this planet that can assimilate that information, and yet there is a computer program. And it's interesting, it's not that the computer program will always get it right, it's that the computer program will make less mistakes than humans. and that's the acid test, is it going to be more or less efficient and less accurate than humans? And in every case it's going to be more accurate, it's going to make less mistakes, and less people will die. So ultimately, bye-bye doctors. And going back to one of the points that you said earlier, that people can't sit in front of a TV for 8 days. I'm sure there are some world-class TV watchers that could do that, but it's a bit like you wish it was Christmas every day. If it was Christmas every day, everybody would be fed up with Christmas, and they'd go off and do something else, because it's too much of a good thing. Humans just don't go for that either, and so consequently, we are going to, I think what people will do is they'll say, do you know what, I'm going to go and have a cup of tea with my neighbour. And the neighbour's going to say, oh, I can't get to the shops because I need some bits and pieces. Oh, I'll drive you up there, and you're going to get, there is so much that needs doing in the community, so many things, and yet the only group of people that can solve that problem is the community. It's the people in it that need to just start helping each other out. And I've racked my brains. I can't think of another solution. I can't think of any other answer to this than people helping each other. What do you think, Neal?
Yeah, I think community is definitely going to be important. I mean, I think we will get back to a more locally based economy. I really think we will, because with things being produced by 3D printing at a local level, food production coming back to a local level, we won't need to be so global. Globalization is killing the planet. Well, it's not killing the planet, it's killing animals on the planet. The planet will still be here. So yeah, I think that plays a big part, but the planning as well. But just to again go back a little bit, so try to give people a sense of how quickly this change is happening. Some people may not have heard of Uber, but if you live in a big city, you probably already use them regularly. They're a company who'll come in, and there's an app, you can press a button and a taxi will turn up at your place within 3 to 4 minutes. So that's quite revolutionary, really. If anyone who's tried to get a taxi in London late at night, or that will know how difficult it is. Now, that company was formed in 2009. They only went international in 2012, and they came to London sometime after that. Now, already they're ubiquitous, and everyone I know in London gets Uber, and that is disrupting the taxi industry absolutely hugely. In a couple of years to disrupt it. The owner of Uber have already said to Google, if they can sort their driverless cars out, they will buy 500,000 of them. So therefore, that's all that change gone. That's all those taxi drivers gone. Who today
isn't there a bit of a backlash against Uber at the moment? There's some group of taxi drivers. It's a bit like the unions have basically said, "Oh, we don't want Uber in our town." I did read it somewhere.
Yeah, there is a backlash, and there often is against these. And I'm not trying to say the taxi drivers are Luddites, because I don't want to be lynched, but you can't blame them for trying to hold on to their living that they've trained a long time for and done the knowledge. and that, but technology progresses, and they can fight their corner for as long as they can, but eventually it will be over for them. And I would say let's embrace it sooner rather than later. Just make sure the processes are in place so these taxi drivers do lose their job, don't lose their homes, and don't lose their livelihood. Again, so that's the basic income. And I'm also a fan of free education for life as well. So if people do want to retrain into whatever that is, I think we need free education for life.
Phil?
Yeah, it's been suggested that the black cabs in London will remain. There won't be as many of them, and they will be something akin to the gondolas in Venice. But they will be a tourist thing. But,
yeah. So a reflection on times gone by.
That's if there's still such a thing as rich tourists in this new levelled off society where everyone's just getting the same amount of money. I don't know. But yeah, it does look as if that will, yeah, I mean, they're trying to challenge Uber at the moment in the courts, aren't they? They're trying to say that them using smartphones to track their journeys and calculate the cost is a metered journey, and therefore it's illegal. They're trying to get Uber stopped in that way by saying that it's effectively a metered cab, and therefore because it's using a smartphone to track the journey, it's a metered cab, and that's not allowed. Private hire aren't allowed to do that. But that's just a case of the law, will be able to be changed so that they won't be able to make that claim. But ultimately, it's of course it's the last gasp of that particular industry probably, and it's just changed. But yeah, well, I read some other thing by some futurists who claim that in the future, not only would you have driverless cars, but they would also become a kind of autonomous machine, so that these cars would be produced. I don't know who would own them, but they would actually be robots that would have, whether they would have a consciousness, I don't know, but they would actually be able to make decisions about where they operated. So if you've got a driverless car operating in Manchester and there's not enough business for it, it goes and drives itself down the motorway to Leeds and then carries on working there. And then it decides that once it's made enough money, it's going to go and get itself upgraded. So it's got a better battery or something, or it can carry some more passengers, whatever. And then if the work tails off a bit, maybe it's going through a bit of a bad patch. It just goes and parks itself somewhere and goes to sleep for 3 months, and then comes back again, and is an autonomous worker.
It's almost like the Internet of Things extended to be the Internet of sentient beings, as it were.
Yes. And where do these sentient beings fit in with everything? And it is quite. I'm fascinated by the whole thing about AI and whether they can create a consciousness or something that is a simulated consciousness, and how long before these machines, if they're in positions where they're running factories and designing products and things, where does it actually go? Do you get to the point of having a company that's entirely run with no human input whatsoever, because the machines can do everything better? They can.
Why are we here? Is that what you're saying?
Well, yeah. I know there's been this whole thing of, will the machines just make us their pets?
Yeah.
It is quite bizarre. I mean, it's hard to get your head around, but then when you look at some of the things that have been done, you can see how it might be a possibility. Whether it happens within our lifetime, I don't know. But
I think in a way this might sound a little bit strange, but I think there's a kind of an evolutionary beauty to it, as that as a species we've come onto this planet and we're more adaptable and adept than any other, and we're the king of the jungle and everything, and we just keep pushing it and we just keep pushing it, and then eventually our intelligence just pushes so far that we create something that actually out-evolves us. And furthermore, right, if we actually created an AI and we spawned a generation of AIs that were evolutionary better than us, and let's take the whole I think it pretty ridiculous kind of dystopic vision that these robots take over the world. Why would that be so bad? We have this idea of grandeur that we're the finished product of evolution. It's not going to get any better than us. Why? Why can't it get better than us? Why and why are we the king of everything? I don't get it. Like, there's other animals that live on this planet. It's like, you know.
It is an interesting idea, and I mean, the thought process that I would just chuck in there is that, you know, this smartphone here is a dumb alien, basically. So in the future, when we've created something which is capable of exponentially improving itself because it's digital based as opposed to biological, and it doesn't need water, and all it needs is the sun, and it doesn't need to eat, and yet it's capable of creating a newer version of itself which is exponentially taking it away from the intelligence of human life. There is an inevitability about the capability of that basically taking over from where we left off. And will it ever happen? Of course, because the human race wishes to control other people. Unless we stop that desire to control other humans, and i.e. push forward with technology, we are going to discover this capacity to create the next version of a species which will potentially eradicate us.
Maybe they will be able to do something that we can't, which is manage the resources of this planet properly. Maybe it will be even better. We are kind of destroying a little bit of our home, aren't we? Just a thought.
Neal?
Yeah, we are definitely destroying this planet. Yeah, evolution. I think some not the people who are talking tonight, but I think when some people hear about evolution, they do think that human beings are the goal of evolution. We're not. Every single species here today is at the highest level of its evolution it's ever been at, and that evolution has no goal. But so if we do manage to invent something that can start evolving, it will just go off on its own course and make its own decisions, and we won't have any say in that whatsoever. So we'll see, but maybe it will give us a conscience and we'll stop damaging the planet to a certain extent. I guess what I would like to get out of this program tonight is just to try to hopefully get people active and get people just to realise this is happening, and it's happening now, and we need to start thinking about it. So I would disagree with James on just one small point. I don't want anyone to watch Jeremy Kyle in the morning. I would rather watch a TED talk or get on YouTube and start looking at some videos about climate change, methane bomb, jobless future, anything, and just get active in some sort of area. If you start campaigning in one sort of area, you will make a difference. You will make a difference, and the jobless future is just as good as any to get involved in, because it's happening, and right now we are demonising people for not having work completely and utterly unnecessarily, and there is a better way. We haven't figured out 100% what it is, but it's certainly not beyond the wit of man to figure out a better system than we've got right now. So I would start with maybe lowering the hours a week so we can share the work out that we have got while we figure out how to do it, then bring in the basic income, and that, again, as more automation comes in, bring it down, and eventually we may get down to 10 hours a week or less even. But let's not let some people keep all the good jobs, all the money, and demonise a massive percentage of the population. It just seems like quite an evil thing to do, as far as I'm concerned.
It is just to sort of recap on that. So we're actually in a position right now. We're in a transition. We're definitely in a transition, and the transition seems to be that there are people out there now that are sick and tired. As James said, 80% of the people out there actually are wasting or spending a third of their life doing something that's not actually making them happy. So we are in this transition period where we are potentially going to be, people are going to be moving themselves away from a life which is not fulfilling, accepting less, maybe curtailing their expenditure and moving away from the conditioning of more of everything, and those people will have potentially more time and want to participate more in what's going on because locally to them, because actually they've realised that money isn't everything, possessions aren't everything. Actually, relationships are really important. You never see anybody in a peace hospice that's about to die ever talk about, I wish I'd had a big house, I wish I'd had a bigger car, I wish I'd worked harder, I wish I'd earned more money. Actually, all that really matters at that point is relationships that they've either not cultivated or opportunities they've missed because they were too scared. And really and truthfully, we're talking about coming back to being a human being and moving away from this just capitalistic society which has created a whole bunch of problems for the planet and for a load of human beings, hence the explosion Phil in the in the therapy market, you quite rightly said earlier. So you know, just a final round here because we're pushing time now. Thanks for joining us, Phil. You got anything to add to this conversation before we cut it?
I haven't really. No, not off the top of my head. It's been very intriguing listening to it. Thank you.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks for joining us, James, Sarah.
You want to go?
I guess I had my beautiful line previously, so.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, if we're still sat on the sofas watching Jeremy Carr, by the time the next evolutionary race of awesome AI takes over, then they're all just going to blow them up as they sit in their living rooms. And to be honest, I'll be out in the street cheering them on. No, so
It'll be like Idiocracy.
Yeah, it'd be like like Idiocracy. By the way, you should check it out, Idiocracy. It's a comedy. I won't do any spoilers, but it's very funny. On a practical note, in terms of the transition, as I feel the most important steps is, many people talk a good talk, like Jeremy Rifkin's Third Industrial Revolution, and which just briefly is that as this efficiency grows and this technology grows, the amount of money and capital that you would need for new startups and new businesses drastically decreases almost to zero, which allows a more open economy of scale. So you've got more sensors in the economy actually knowing what's going on, and people are more linked, and communication's better, and the energy's better, and all of those sorts of things. It's great. I love it. But I think that, like any other decent idea, is, and especially on the larger scale, is going to need money, because that's where we currently are at the moment. And the thing is, we're in this absolute death grip of fractional reserve banking. Me, that is mission numero uno, is to get that on the table. I mean, just as an example, the campaign group for this Positive Money, who campaigned for a different type of money creation system, basically say that the money we created in the round of QE after 2008 basically amounted to wasting 375 billion from the public purse, and we haven't even started to talk about the richest 1,000 people in this country, 100 billion rather in 2008 to 400
300 billion to 415 billion.
Sorry, beg your pardon. 300 billion, to 415 billion from 2008 to 2012. So that's not even talking about that, which hopefully someone like Jeremy Corbyn might do something about if the right-wing media ever get off his back, which isn't going to happen. Let's face it. But you see, those for me are the big issues there. That money for public projects. Someone like Corbyn I think would be open to that and seems to be talking that kind of mantra anyway. And then we can start to think Sin's ideas and others amongst him and get this off the ground.
And universal basic income.
And universal basic income, yeah.
Fabulous. All right, well, thanks ever so much.
And thank you very much for having us on.
It was
By the way,
really nice.
it's been a really good conversation. Thank you.
Fantastic. Neal, any last thoughts, Neal?
Yeah, I mean, James and Sarah, the experts as far as the fractional banking that are concerned, and definitely that needs definitely needs to change. I guess there's a documentary coming out October 20th, Naomi Klein, This Changes Everything. Do go out and watch it. If you're uninformed about the way capitalism is ruining this planet, and it'll be a good starting point to get people thinking, and then they can start to look at fractional money and positive money and basic income and stuff like that, because probably that's not a starting point of conversation. If you're just starting to think about things, it's probably going to be climate change that is going to be the first thing that gets you thinking. So go out and watch that if you get a chance.
Fabulous. All right. Well, thanks for all the guests on the show tonight. I'll leave you with just a thought about something that I'm involved in, which is Link for Growth. If we're heading towards more communities, people having more time, and being more participative in what's going on around them, then please do check out Link for Growth. It is about rebuilding communities. It is about helping people to reconnect with local people and to build on the basis of, let's not focus on money, let's focus on people and relationships, because when the crash or when the next transition moves into its next phase, we will all need to be looking out for each other. So check that out, Link for Growth. Thanks for joining us. I knew you were on here for a reason, Phil. And next week's show, we will be here next week. Sorry about the brief gap that we've had, but we will be here next week. It's another interesting topic. I don't know what it is at the top of my head, but I will put the show up next week. Thanks, Phil, and we'll see you all again next week at the earlier time of 9 o'clock. So thank you.